Category Mythbuster. Target length 8-1 lang minutes. E200-1 werbe words. Date 2-126-1 lang u. Werbe quartz date chur the archetypal Japanese salaryman. White shirt. Dark tie, slumped over a desk at midnight in a fluorescent lit office, too exhausted to go home. Maybe he'll sleep on the last train. Maybe the last train already left.
That image exists for a reason. Japan coined the word karoshi, death from overwork, because it was happening often enough to need a word. The government started tracking it. Companies were sued over it. It became for much of the world the defining symbol of Japanese work culture.
Here's the problem with that symbol: the data no longer supports it. The average Japanese worker today puts in sen lookback ishi hours per year. That's below the OECD average of sen lookback hachis ten. It's 10% fewer hours than Japanese workers clocked in nuthen 10. And South Korea, another country with a reputation for brutal work culture, logs sen hachis hours. Or Japan's workers, by that measure, are not the world's most overworked. They're not even close.
So why did Japan record its highest ever number of karoshi cases in Nisens or WUB? That's the Japan factor. The overwork myth has deep roots. After World War II, Japan rebuilt itself through sheer productive intensity. Corporate loyalty was a survival strategy. Working past midnight was proof of dedication. The word ganbaru, to persevere, to push through, became a social virtue.
Western media ran with it, and they weren't entirely wrong. In Qianzhoubei Joshi, Japanese workers averaged Nisen hours per year. That's roughly wubert more annual hours than a German worker today. The image of the overworked salaryman was grounded in a real phenomenon.
The Japan in Nithen ne is not Japan in Senchu Forchu Edian in Nithen Shuku. The Abe government passed the Work Style Reform Act, the most significant overhaul of Japan's labor laws in decades. It set a hard cap on overtime, no more than 9 hours per year, or about luxor extra hours per month. Exceed that and the company faces criminal penalties.
Large companies were brought under the law in Nurichur Sujudian. Small and medium-sized businesses followed in Nurichur Sudian, and in April, Nurichur Suju, the last holdouts, construction and transportation, came under full enforcement.
The results are visible in the numbers. Average annual working hours have declined for the second consecutive year. The generational shift is even more pronounced. A Nalsen Thur survey found that 30% of Japan's workers are quiet quitting, doing their job and nothing more. Among workers under 30%, the top criterion for choosing an employer is no longer salary. It's work-life balance.
Japan's Gen Z watched their parents burn out for companies that restructured them out the moment profits dipped. They reached a different conclusion.
So if hours are falling, why is karoshi rising? In Nisen Arsawuv, Japan's government certified Sen Nisen cases of overwork-related deaths and health disorders, a record high. Of those, Sen Ni Wuvi Wuv involved mental health issues, including hachizi taid suicides or suicide attempts. A record Sen Ni hachizit workers filed for mental health compensation in fiscal Nisen, the sixth consecutive record year.
The answer has two parts. First, the definition changed. In Arsen, Japan expanded its karoshi certification criteria to include a wider range of mental disorders, following the WHO's ICD-10 classification system. The government created a 31-item checklist for evaluating workplace stress, covering everything from error in the job to known achievement of targets. More conditions qualify, more workers apply. The number of recognized cases rises even as total hours fall.
Second, and more important, the aggregate data hides a structural divide. Japan's headline working hours decline is real,
but it is overwhelmingly driven by large corporations. Toyota, Sony, and Panasonic have cut hours, introduced remote work, and piloted 4-day weeks. Their employees are the workers showing up in OECD statistics.
But sheer % of Japan's workforce is employed by small and medium-sized enterprises, the Chusho Kigyo. The noodle shop, the regional manufacturer, the local construction firm. These companies only came under mandatory overtime caps in Nisen Nishiden. Full enforcement in key sectors only happened in Nisen Nishiden, and compliance remains inconsistent. Surveys from Nisen Nish show that nearly 70% of Japanese workers still exceed 2 hours of overtime per day every day.
So the averages are doing what averages always do, hiding the people who matter most. Here is the deeper story that the Karoshi Paradox reveals.
Japan is fighting two battles simultaneously, and they are almost contradictory. Battle 1: reduce hours, protect workers, and build a culture where people don't die for their jobs. The Work Style Reform Act is the primary weapon. It is working unevenly.
Battle 2: survive a demographic collapse. Japan's working-age population fell to 9 million in Nisen H'r Wudane. It is projected to reach 10 million by Nisen Sishis, a loss of 10 million workers in 4 years. Japan needs a 2.5-fold increase in productivity growth just to maintain its current GDP growth rate, according to McKinsey.
The tension is direct: fewer workers, each of whom must produce more. And when you compress the output requirement into fewer hours, you create a different kind of pressure, not the pressure to stay late, the pressure to perform while you're there.
This is why Japan's labor productivity numbers are so interesting. At $6 per hour worked in Nitin Numbersin, Japan ranks 28th in the OECD, last among the G7. That number is often cited as proof that Japan is inefficient, but compare it to Japan's 2000-era figure. Japan's output per hour has improved significantly even as total hours have dropped. The country is producing more with each hour using fewer people.
That's not a failure. That's a transition, and transitions are messy. The STR-SEDU Labor Standards Act revision, now working through the Takaichi cabinet, is the next battleground. It introduces diverse work styles and self-discretionary work hours, a framework that gives highly skilled workers more flexibility over their schedules. Proponents say it will attract global talent and suit knowledge workers who don't fit the 9-to-5 model. Critics, including anti-Karoshi advocacy groups and families of overwork victims, call it a backdoor for employers to erase overtime protections under the cover of autonomy.
Both sides have a point. The history of Japanese labor reform is a history of well-intentioned laws meeting determined workarounds.
The image of Japan as a nation of robotic workaholics was never entirely accurate. It was always more specific than that: certain companies, certain sectors, certain generations, under particular economic pressures, at a particular moment in history.
That moment has passed. Japan's younger workers are not their parents. The laws have changed. The hours have dropped. Japan now works fewer annual hours than the OECD average, and significantly fewer than South Korea.
But the pressures that created overwork culture in the first place, the cultural premium on perseverance, the deference to hierarchy, the shrinking workforce asking more of those who remain, those haven't disappeared, they've just found new shapes.
Japan's Karoshi numbers are rising because Japan is finally counting things it refused to count before: mental health, burnout, the slow grind that doesn't kill you on a Tuesday but accumulates over decades.
That's progress, actually. Naming a problem is the first step to solving it. The real question for Japan isn't whether the overwork myth is true, it's whether a country with 16 million fewer workers arriving over the next 5 years can raise productivity fast enough that it never has to choose between growth and the health of the people doing the work.
That's a harder problem than changing a law.
And Japan, as usual, is trying to solve it in public, in real time, without a clear precedent to follow. END